Mike Awesome was years ahead of his time. While there were a fair amount of impressive heavyweight wrestlers on the scene 20 years ago, few combined jaw-dropping agility with raw power along with a knack for arena-encompassing, furniture-destroying brawls the way that the 290-pound Awesome did. Everything about the man felt evolutionary, except for the mullet, but that was the charm of Awesome. And that's why it's not at all surprising that in September of 1999, ECW, weeks after gaining national TV clearance on TNN, put its world championship on the seemingly-peerless powerhouse, positioning him as a final boss of sorts. But 7 months later, Awesome exited ECW under an intense cloud of controversy, and the manner in which he dropped the belt was just as head-spinning, because it involved both WCW and the WWF. This is Behind the Match. Prior to 1999, the well-travelled Awesome made his presence felt in ECW through a pair of short stints. One took place in 1994 and included one of the wildest 2-minute matches in history against local mainstay JT Smith, and the other came in the summer of 1998 when he and FMW rival Masato Tanaka brought their bone-rattling wars stateside to plenty of fanfare. The two forever embedded themselves into ECW lore at the 1998 Heatwave pay-per-view with one particular battle, which was just business as usual for those two. But that go-around for Awesome was cut short in September 1998 when he appeared to blow his knee out during a match with Balls Mahoney at the ECW arena. Afterward, in an apparent shoot, Awesome took to the mic and explained that he needed to go away and heal his badly ailing body, and that he'd see everybody in a year's time. Lending credence to this unexpected revelation, Awesome didn't actually return to the ring until 11 months later as part of All Japan's Summer Action Series in August of 1999. And the following month, 1 year to the day after he uttered that odd prophecy, Awesome made a surprise return to ECW. Just as world champion Taz was getting set to defend his belt against Tanaka at the Anarchy Rules pay-per-view in Chicago, Awesome, along with new manager Judge Jeff Jones, suddenly appeared at ringside trying to get over the barricade. This led to Taz, gruff fighting champion that he was, permitting Awesome into the match to make it a 3-way dance. Then, to an even bigger shock, the seemingly unbeatable Taz was pinned just minutes into the impromptu elimination contest. And as it turns out, Taz was now on job duty, because weeks earlier, the Human Suplex Machine had signed a deal to jump ship to the WWF and was now ceding losses to others on his way out the door. The fans booed Taz through his introduction, serenading him with the time-honored chant of "You sold out." So for Awesome and Tanaka to dispatch of him rather quickly was probably more pleasing to Chicago fans than a Brett Favre mid-game retirement would have been at the time. Awesome and Tanaka both went on with their usual dance of death after Taz's exit, culminating with Awesome powerbombing Tanaka off the ropes and through a table to become ECW's world champion. Taz then returned to the ring to endorse the towering conqueror after the match, and suddenly the top dog of Extreme Championship Wrestling was somebody that hadn't been seen in 12 months. It was quite the startling turn of events, to put it mildly. As champion, Awesome absorbed the best shots of his challengers before killing them dead with his brutish offense. Opponents like Rhino, New Jack, Spike Dudley, and Just Incredible all felt the unfathomable wrath of the Awesome Bomb, all of them launched to and fro like unwilling lawn darts. He held the ECW title from September 1999 into April 2000, with the exception of 6 days in December when Tanaka had a cup of coffee with the strap, winning it from Awesome and then losing it back to him. And as the new millennium dawned, ECW began building to a mega match between Awesome and seemingly forever television champion and ECW's most popular star, Rob Van Dam. The theoretical champion versus champion, finesse versus power, man versus machine match would have been a big deal for ECW, but was unfortunately snuffed out in late January when Van Dam suffered a leg injury that put him on the shelf for several months. He ended up vacating the TV title after a mammoth 23-month reign. And by the time Van Dam returned 4 months later to the house he'd long presided over, Mike Awesome no longer lived there. It's hardly a secret that ECW had serious financial issues throughout its lifetime, and the losses mounted more heavily at the turn of the millennium. Stories of bounced or withheld checks became more regular, and the promotion's bigger stars routinely felt the squeeze of no income. Mike Awesome was one such star. With a wife and 2 children at home, he could ill afford to not get paid, and by the spring of 2000, the ECW champion had come to regret giving up a lucrative career in Japan to be world champion of a promotion that couldn't even come through financially for him. What good is it being on top of a company when you have to worry about possibly missing mortgage payments? The solution to Awesome's monetary woes began with a family connection. His cousin was wrestler Michael Bollea, who Awesome had worked with many times in FMW throughout the 90s, where Bollea wrestled under the name of Horace Boulder. And if those names sound familiar, well, that's because Horace now wrestled for WCW, where his uncle had at least a little bit of stroke. You might have heard of him. His name is Hulk Hogan. Horace put Awesome in contact with Uncle Hulk, who advised him that he should not be working for free, resulting in Awesome skipping out on a pair of ECW house shows in Ohio, as well as a TV taping in Buffalo. And when phrased that way, ECW might have gone under a little bit sooner if the entire roster and crew had attended one of Hogan's TED Talks. When the no-shows started, rumors began to swirl that Awesome was jumping to WCW, champion or not. Heyman and others reportedly tried to get in touch with Awesome that weekend, and after many missed calls, finally got a hold of his wife in the wee hours. According to the story from Scotty Williams' book Hardcore History, she very calmly informed Heyman that her husband was at the airport and she would pass along his message. The passage indicates that it was an uncharacteristically even-keeled response from a wife getting a 2 a.m. phone call from her husband's employer inquiring to his whereabouts. Of course, those in ECW quickly deduced that Awesome was flying somewhere that definitely wasn't an ECW event. The news was pretty much confirmed that Friday on the radio show of Bubba the Love Sponge, who was once a member of Hogan's Inner Circle. He reported that Awesome signed a deal with WCW in the high 6-figure range, and since the reigning ECW champion was no longer showing up at the events for the company he was champion of, connecting the dots was made a little bit easier. But ECW and Heyman weren't completely powerless in this scenario, it seemed. The Wrestling Observer newsletter reported that at Saturday's taping in Buffalo, Heyman showed several individuals what was said to be Awesome's legally binding ECW contract, reportedly signed by the wrestler himself. The contract's legitimacy may have been another issue. Dave Meltzer would write in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the nature of the business being what it is, there were those who even questioned whether the signature was real. Particularly since friends of Awesome, and apparently even Awesome himself, were insistent that he'd never actually signed his contract. Eric Bischoff, meanwhile, maintains that Awesome's ECW contract wasn't valid, and contends that it was either a verbal agreement between Awesome and Heyman, or perhaps a written contract that had Heyman's signature on it, but definitely not Awesome's. Lance Storm, who was soon to leave ECW for WCW himself, adds that Awesome refused to sign his ECW contract until he received all the money he was due. And the account of events in Hardcore History claims that Awesome had presented a copy of that contract to WCW, pointing out the areas where it had been breached. To him, those breaches invalidated the contract and made him a free agent. If that's what's happened, there was just one little issue. Awesome's contract reportedly had a clause stating that ECW had 30 days to take care of any breaches brought to management's attention. Given the crunch timeframe between Awesome choosing to no-show ECW's events and the moment he inked a deal with WCW, the ball appeared to be very much in ECW's court, and WCW was going to have to pony up something substantial to get the guy. Monday, April 10th was the date of what was to be a monumental episode of Monday Nitro. Taking place in Denver, the reset button had been pushed, and the company was about to begin the all-encompassing Millionaires Club vs. New Blood storyline, with Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo forming an unholy union to lead the latter group. It was also designed to feature the debut of Mike Awesome as a big-money free agent meant to add fresh blood to a roster in dire need of it. The contract conundrum, however, left Awesome's emergence in limbo. There was even an idea to have Awesome throw the ECW belt in a trash can, just as Medusa did to the WWF Women's title on Nitro in 1995, but that wouldn't come to pass, especially as Heyman was able to get an injunction that prevented WCW from tarnishing their most valuable prop. ECW and WCW negotiated all day on that Monday, trying to come to an agreement on how Awesome could appear on Nitro, with ECW receiving satisfactory compensation. Since ECW was claiming a valid contract on Awesome's part, the finalized terms included WCW paying out 6 figures to secure Awesome's contractual release. Additionally, Awesome could not bring the ECW belt on WCW television, and WCW would have to allow for Awesome to return to ECW for one night to lose the belt inside their ring. During Awesome's debut angle, WCW announcers had to promote that Awesome's title defense was coming up this Thursday at an ECW live event in Indianapolis. This would allow ECW to broadcast Awesome's title loss on Friday's TNN program before the deposed champion could wrestle his first match for WCW. WCW agreed to these terms, and there appeared to be no issues, until Awesome's debut actually took place. The man soon to be dubbed the Career Killer attacked Kevin Nash in his introductory angle. However, the plug for his title defense in Indianapolis was done so vaguely by the announcers that ECW felt it wasn't sufficient to the terms of the agreement. Also, Awesome did cut a promo, which was apparently a no-no in regards to what WCW and ECW had agreed to. This only increased the uneasy tensions between promotions, and the next day WCW taped Thunder in Colorado Springs, where Awesome was scheduled to make his second appearance for the company. However, as Williams later wrote in regards to WCW violating the agreement, federal marshals hauled Awesome out of the Colorado Springs arena, and thus more legal maneuvering between the sides was in order. This led to more back and forth between the companies in an attempt to smooth things over. Heyman's demand to settle things was another cash settlement, and that he would have the lone say in who Awesome lost the belt to, and how he lost it. And after WCW agreed to those terms, Heyman then reached out to the World Wrestling Federation. When Awesome arrived in Indianapolis on Thursday, he came with WCW's head of security, Doug Dellinger. The champion was not permitted in the locker room under the orders of Heyman, and he had to enter the small-scale Murat Center through the front door. Awesome and Jeff Jones were soundly booed by the assembled crowd of 1,700 within the building, expectedly met with chants of "You sold out." Jones issued an open challenge to anyone in the locker room to come out and wrest the title from Awesome's grip, when some familiar music then hit. Well, it wasn't familiar in an ECW sense, but rather music from another company. The beeps of a flatlining heart monitor reverberated throughout the small venue, fighting for decibel space with raucous and disbelieving cheers. Enter Taz to his WWF entrance music 3 months after debuting for the organization at the Royal Rumble. In a weird reversal of September's events, Taz, the sellout of September by ECW fans' definition of the term anyway, was returning to dethrone the new sellout. This made Taz a hero in the eyes of ECW fans. The apparent righting of Awesome's wrong lasted a full minute and 13 seconds and still managed to be slightly overbooked. The referee took a bump 45 seconds into the match, allowing for Tommy Dreamer to hit the ring and DDT Awesome, softening him up for Taz to snare him in the Taz mission. A few half-hearted taps later, Taz was now the ECW World Champion, and a detached Awesome left the ring, calmly evacuating through the crowd while hardly selling any of the beating. So, what was the point of all this? Why not use an ECW regular to get the rub from leaving Awesome laying? Awesome himself said that he wished he could have put over the 24-year-old Rhino, who was on the rise at the time. He even said later he would have been happy to put Rhino over cleanly, but instead, he had to adhere to the script. Sure, it was historic to see a WWF guy beat a WCW guy for the ECW Championship, which is an oddity unlike few others in a business that deals in oddness, but that seemed to contrast with ECW's outlaw image, this overt cozying up to Vince's business. Maybe it would have looked better if the WWF reached out first and said, hey, you know what would be funny, instead of Heyman willfully making the connection and offering the proposal to Vince. And the following week, Taz brought the ECW title onto WWF programming for 2 shows in Eastern Pennsylvania, ECW's neck of the woods. He proceeded to lose both matches, failing to win a hardcore title triple threat on Raw at Penn State University, and then lost to WWF champion Triple H on SmackDown in Philadelphia in a shade under 6 minutes. Those who say that all publicity's good publicity probably haven't watched enough wrestling in their lifetimes. Taz then went on to drop the ECW title proper to Tommy Dreamer at the ECW Arena that Saturday night, giving the Innovator of Violence his first singles title of any kind with the promotion. This again begs a similar question: why not just have Dreamer, the heart and soul of ECW, be the one to slay the traitor on his way out? Instead, he ended up being the guy who helped the guy that won, meaning that it took two men to defeat the supposed turncoat. Heyman apparently scripted the entire match, which leads one to wonder if he'd even bothered to read it after he'd finished. It's not hard to argue that WCW actually ended up making Awesome look worse than Heyman did, seeing as they took this badass heavyweight Punisher and reduced him to playing the fat chick Thriller, and later a leisure suit wearing club hopper straight out of Saturday Night Fever, known as that 70s guy. We did wind up with the WWF wrestler versus WCW wrestler for an ECW belt lightning in a bottle moment that will never be replicated, but was the booking of the match, or ECW being treated as an afterthought on WWF TV, or poor Mike Awesome sashaying off the Partridge Family bus really worth that price? Financial distress, legal wrangling, and other headaches led to the match and various forms of devaluation across several promotions that followed. In between, there were about 73 seconds of convoluted wrestling meant to create history, but as most wrestling fans today can tell you, the word historic isn't always synonymous with good.